It is written in the scriptures that we should journey to Jerusalem 3 times a year. We are going up to the city of God, to Jerusalem, to celebrate.
The Lord told the children of Israel to honor 7 holy celebrations each year involving 3 journeys to Jerusalem. Each festival would be uniquely fulfilled in the coming of the Messiah. The holy days of our Lord, shadows of things to come.
In the first century, it was tradition to light an oil lamp on each night of the 8-day celebration called Hanukkah, the Feast of Dedication, or Festival of Lights. On the 25th day of Kislev in 164 BC, the previously defiled temple was cleansed and rededicated to the service of the Lord. The Messiah and his disciples celebrated this tradition. As it states in the Gospel of John, chapter 10, at that time, the Feast of the Dedication took place at Jerusalem. It was winter, and Jesus was walking in the temple in the portico of Solomon.
Chanukah, the Festival of Lights. It's one of those festivals where the Jewish people light candelabra. There's a beautiful one behind me, a menorah it's called in Hebrew. This 7-branch menorah is the one from the tabernacle, and it's a very ornate one. You can see the figure of Moses, his hands lifted up and held up during the battle, and many other figures in Jewish history are carved on it. We're on Capitol Hill, in effect. Right across from me is the Knesset, the Parliament of Israel, and this is a public park. People come and go, of course, with children and so on all day long. And we came here to tell the story of this festival. It's all prophesied in Daniel 8. Now as he was speaking with me, that's Gabriel in the chapter, I was in a deep sleep on my face toward the ground, but he touched me and set me upright, and he said, Behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation, for at the time appointed the end shall be. And Daniel had a vision of various animals with different numbers of horns and so on, and we would be perhaps a little confused, but the angel here interprets that vision. The ram which thou sawest, having 2 horns, are the kings of Media and Persia, and the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Now that being broken, whereas 4 stood up for it. When Alexander of Greece attacked the Medo-Persia, it was broken up into 4 kingdoms. That's a historical fact. And it says, 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. And in the latter time of their kingdom. This is interesting. While he's telling this story, his prophecy leaps to the end times, because he says, and in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. This is obviously a reference to the Antichrist and the end times of Israel, and it says, his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power, and he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. It's as if Gabriel is saying, while I'm on the subject of Greco-Syrian kingdoms and rulers and so on, there's a dark prince of the end times out of the same people. And this is the passage that convinces many that that personality will be Syrian or Greco-Syrian, something of that nature. It says, and through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. This is one of the most surprising prophecies. A man who will destroy many by way of peace. So here we are in a time of peace processes of Israel and so on, and finding that someone will destroy many with peace. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. So in opposing the Messiah, of course, he'll lose. But at a time when practically the whole world at least pretends to make peace here, it's sobering to read of destruction by way of peace. Well, it was celebrated by the Messiah himself in John 10:22. It was at Jerusalem, the Feast of Dedication, and it was winter. This festival comes in December normally. He had come here for the festival, and Jesus walked in the temple in Solomon's porch. That's the southern end of the temple, above the Huldah gates by the southern steps of the temple. That's where the poor people typically entered the temple. Then came the Jews round about him and said unto him, How long dost thou make us to doubt? If thou be the Messiah, tell us plainly. He answered them, I told you, and you believed not. The works that I do in my Father's name, they bear witness of me. But ye believe not, because ye are not of my sheep. As I said unto you, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. And I give unto them eternal life, and they shall never perish, neither shall any man pluck them out of my hand. My Father which gave them to me is greater than all, and no man is able to pluck them out of my Father's hand. A very important passage, obviously. And then he utters the final statement, I and my Father are one. You know, at this moment, the light of the world reveals himself on the Festival of Lights. And when he says, I and my Father are one, this is the most clear announcement of his messiahship, his kingship. The passage is gripping because he said it outright in the temple, surrounded, and it says they took up stones again to stone him, and Jesus answered, Many good works have I shown you from my Father. For which of those works do you stone me? That's a kind of irony that makes this Jewish writing, in my view. That's a way of saying it. The ricochet is more deadly than the direct hit. And the way he put it is such an Israeli way of speaking. Well, the history of the thing, you know, Chanu means rested, and Ka is the number 25. They rested on the 25th. And on the 25th day of the month of Kislev, roughly December, Chanukah, the miracle happened. And, you know, I suspect this is where we got December 25th. I can just hear the Romans saying, there's a festival already at this time of year. Maybe we ought to take it over. They had their own pagan festival, Saturnalia, at the same time of year, and early Christians began to think they needed a festival, I suppose, at that time. But in any case, somebody said, what is Kislev? Well, Kislev was December on the Roman calendar, so they made December 25th Jesus' birth. I don't know. That's just a speculation. Anyway, there's a tradition then of a candle lighting on that day, a menorah, and the candle is, the menorah is supposed to be in the window for all to see. This made things very tough on the Jews in the Inquisition. In Spain, with forced conversions, some Jews weakened under the duress, the tortures. And of course, they told the priests, we convert, we believe, okay, have it your way. But then their houses were watched, especially on Hanukkah and on each Sabbath, to see if candles could be seen in the window, and if they were, well, they backslid and so forth. And it was an awful time. The law told them to do this thing, and yet they were caught for doing it. The Hanukkah menorah has a central candle called the shamash, with which you light all the other candles. And that means servant. It's a servant candle. It's the one that lights all the others. And it's so obviously a type of the Messiah. He is the suffering servant of Isaiah 53. And I think the menorah itself testifies to him. Charities for the blind are usually remembered on this day, the Festival of Lights, because the blind never see lights, so they are helped at this time. Children play a game with a little top they spin with 4 letters on it, a dreidel. The 4 letters are the initials of Nes Gadol Hayashem. A great miracle happened here. The Jewish destiny is to be a light unto the nations. This God told Abraham. But as they have no Messiah in general, and I say that now in general because during the time I've been in the Lord, some 30 years, I have seen so many Jews come that I'm beginning to say in general rather than they had no Messiah. But they are persuading people about mortgages, dresses, jewelry, whatever, but they are born salespeople and influential in their communities. And Having no Messiah, they sell him something else. But they really were to be the salesmen of Christ. It stands to reason. And in the tribulation coming up, when God needs witnesses, he will call 144,000 of whom? 12,000 of each of the 12 tribes of Israel. So they will be a light unto the world still again. Now in Daniel 9:27, it says that the Antichrist will break the covenant with the Jews, and he will desecrate the temple. Matthew 24:15, the Lord himself said, when you see that abomination of desolation stand in the holy place, flee into the hills of Judea. And so there was a desecration of the temple. Well, that's what happened originally. The Assyrians had taken over in the temple. Antiochus had a pig sacrificed on the altar. It was horrible. The Maccabees attacked him, rebelled, a successful rebellion. They took the temple back, but they found a canister of oil that was only to last one day, and they needed it was 7 more days to consecrate new oil. But you couldn't let the flame go out. It was an eternal light. The temple candlestick, this one, has to always be lit. And so they prayed over that can of oil and fed it into the lamp. And they waited that day, and it stayed lit that day and that night and the next day and the next night. And it stayed for 8 days. And that is the 8 candlesticks. They light another one each night for 8 nights. Well, in Messiah's time, the Romans were, the Jews were an occupied nation so much of the time. The Romans were in charge then, later the Muslims, and then the Crusaders, and finally the Antichrist will defame in the temple. But we could always remember that the Jewish nation was saved at Chanukah by this great miracle. And it was saved also at Purim by still another miracle, and we'll tell you that story right after this. Purim is another festival where the Jewish people were delivered. This one over in Persia, and Esther is the subject of it. Of course, the book of Esther tells the entire story. The wicked prime minister Haman plotted against the Jews, persuaded the king that they should be eliminated. How many times has this happened in history? And Esther got in the way. She fasted 3 days in prayer for her people. She appealed to the king. In any case, they overcame Haman, and they were not executed. They were spared. So every year on Adar 14, that is the 14th day of the 12th month, or sometimes there is an Adar 2, a leap month on the Jewish calendar, 7 times in every 19-year cycle, if you'll believe me. There is a leap month, and so, but in any case, Purim is always exactly 1 month before Passover. Since Passover is on the first full moon of spring, Purim is always on the last full moon of winter, and it's easy to locate that festival. They are all designed that way, as we said in other programs in this series. God put the heavenly bodies up there for signs and for seasons, and the people who really didn't have calendars depended on the heavenly bodies. It's also known as the Festival of Lots because lots were drawn to choose what day the Jewish people would be destroyed, and so they remember it that way. The celebration in the synagogue is interesting. They read the whole book of Esther, so-called the whole Megillah. They read it from the top to the bottom, and the children have graggers in their hand, awful noisemakers that they shake, rather like we do at New Year's or Mardi Gras. They make a lot of noise when the rabbi pronounces the name of Haman, the prime minister. And I remember as a little kid sitting in the synagogue in a costume dressed as Mordecai or somebody in the story, and the rabbi reading slowly through the whole Megillah, and all of us waiting with our bated breath and our noisemakers ready, and finally he would come to Haman, and the synagogue would just jump up and down with the noise and the racket, and all we kids would just run around the place. It was a free-for-all. The synagogue and its formal aisles and platforms and so on was all put into the hands of the children for Purim, and we had quite a good time with it. There's a prophetic significance to this festival. Although the name of God is not mentioned anywhere in the book, the Scofield Bible points out wherever the Jews are, even outside the land, God is with them, and his providence always saves them. And in this case, Esther's fast, you know, is like the 3 days that the Lord was away before his resurrection. She fasted exactly 3 days. And Esther then triumphing over evil, over Haman, becomes the Christian walk, a new life. We too triumph over evil, over sin. And our new decree triumphs. The king read out a new decree, and our new decree, of course, is called Berit HaChadashah, the New Testament. And we triumph along with Christ, and one day we'll be resurrected just as he was. To find out more about the festivals of Chanukah and Purim, our producer Ken Berg spoke to Sandy Wingate, a Gentile believer who lives in Israel.
Sandy, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us today and sharing with us. Could you explain for us, please, what's on the table and just exactly what happens in Israel during Hanukkah?
Okay. Well, Hanukkah is a very festive time, and of course it takes place usually in December because it's the calendar month of Kislev. And so it's cold, sometimes rainy, it can snow even. But in the home, it's a very warm atmosphere because you have the menorah. In America or in Europe, we know it as the menorah, but it's really the Chanukah, distinct from the regular Jewish menorah, which has 7 branches, and this has 8 plus 1. In the menorah, you see, has one candle that is raised, and that's because it's the shamas, or the servant candle, and it is used to light the other candles. By the last night of Hanukkah, you light 8, and you always start you start with the candle for that evening, but you add the candles from the left. So for tomorrow night, we would put the candle here and then light it from that candle first.
And there's other menorahs here?
Yes. This one, you see, has all 8 candles, and it's quite bright by the time the last night of Hanukkah comes. Different styles. There's not an official style, although I think most people traditionally like the one that looks like the menorah.
And what else on this table is used in Hanukkah?
This is the Dreidel, and it is used to play a game that was played in the time that Hanukkah took place originally, in around 167 BC or BCE, before the Common Era.
Right.
And the children would be looking at the Torah, be studying the Torah, but they would have dreidels, usually made of clay, handy, so that if the Greeks came, the soldiers came, they could switch quickly and hide their scriptures and look like they're playing games. And the letters on the dreidel stand for Neskado Haya Sham, or Neskado Haya Po. Po is here. If you're in Israel, we say a great miracle happened here. If you're in America or Europe or in another country, you say a great miracle happened there, meaning Eretz Israel.
Well, what about the festival of Purim?
Purim is a holiday that starts at the synagogue, because one of the mitzvot of Purim is to go to the synagogue and to read the book of Esther. And every time the name of Haman, who's the villain, is said, then you make as much noise to boo out his name. That's why you use things like this, the grauger, or any kind of noisemaker. It's to get his name out of hearing. And then also when you hear the name of Mordechai, who is the hero, and Esther, who is the heroine, you cheer and clap and make as much noise as possible. So it starts at the synagogue, because it's required to read through the book of Esther. Then people come home to their families or go to parties. Children especially go to parties, and they wear costumes. This is an example of a part of a costume, a wig. And I
wear something like
yes, I've worn wigs like this, but mine was a bright orange red, but very metallic looking. Masks, and there's a reason for the masks and the costumes, because there's a hidden aspect to Purim, and the hiddenness is that in the whole book of Esther, the name of God is never mentioned, and yet God is very much behind the scenes orchestrating the preservation of his people. And this is the idea of the costumes. and also that it's a festive time.
Well, Sandy, if you're not Jewish yourself, why the interest in Jewish things?
Well, I have been involved with the Jewish community for more than 30 years in many aspects and many levels. One aspect is to build a better relationship, a better understanding. Certainly I share my faith when it's appropriate and if I'm asked. But the holidays for me as a Gentile Christian are very special because they're biblical holidays. Even though Chanukah is not commanded in the scriptures, it is mentioned, not in the Tanakh, not in the Hebrew Bible, but in John chapter 10 it's mentioned that Jesus was in Jerusalem. It was the Feast of Dedication, which is Chanukah. Purim, of course, is from the book of Esther. For me as a believer in Jesus, in Yeshua, the holidays have both a historical significance and they have a Messianic significance. And it's also a way that I identify, first of all, with the God of Israel. The God that I love and worship is the God of Israel. That's his name. And as a believer in Jesus and as a Gentile, I'm identifying myself with the Jewish people, and that I owe a debt to the Jewish people for all that I have received spiritually. My faith is Jewish, and when my Lord comes back, he's coming back as the king of the world, but as Israel's king. And so there's a connection in terms of the scripture, in terms of my own heritage as a believer, even though I'm not Jewish. And I have a father, Abraham, as well.
Well, Sandy, thanks so much for your time and for the interview.
Welcome.
You know, both Chanukah and Purim have to do with these final solutions to the Jewish problem that have come up throughout history. I mean, we're in the age of the Holocaust. We certainly remember that one well, but there have been others. I'm afraid Haman of Purim is not the first prime minister or king or Caesar who wanted to get rid of the Jews. This goes all the way back to Pharaoh, who enslaved the Hebrews, and after setting them free, tried to chase after and get them back. Goes through Nebuchadnezzar, who destroyed the temple, Antiochus, who desecrated it and causing the rededication, that is, Chanukah. Titus, who crashed down the second temple in 70 A.D. Hadrian, the anti-Semitic Roman emperor, who renamed the land Palestina or Palestine in memory of the Philistines, ancient Greeks, not Arabs, who lived there 1,000 years before and were the worst enemies of the Jews. He chose their name. Arafat, of course, just picked it up. There's no relationship between the Arabs of today and the Palestinians of old. The Crusades, terrible, terrible. The armies of Europe were carrying crosses and teaching love and lopping off heads in the Holy Land. The Inquisition, horrible, horrible excess of the Catholic Church, terribly anti-Semitic, murdering people, torturing people to death. The Holocaust is without peer. I can't compare it to anything. And we come down to today. We have Arafat, Clinton, people wanting to take Israel apart and get rid of the Jews again. It's the final solution to the Jewish problem again, 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 again. Of course, the Jewish problem is God chose them. I mean, everybody wants to replace them, so to speak. This is the original replacement theology. Get rid of the people God chose. And doctrines that come along to turn our backs on the Jews. Progressive dispensationalism, we mention constantly. It's one of the latest ones to turn our backs quietly on Israel and sound terribly theological while we do that. I'm afraid our best seminaries have joined the ranks of those kind of getting rid of the Jews. They're getting rid of them theologically. They're not actually killing them, but in a way they are, because people that don't get saved are going to die, and I mean the second death. The Lord, however, still prevails. He always rescues his people like he did at Chanukah. You know, when this menorah burned 8 days, when the oil that was a one-day supply lasted 8 days, the miracle of Hanukkah, well, that idea of light comes all the way down through the Messiah, the light of the world. In John 10:22, it says he went down to Jerusalem. It was winter to celebrate the Feast of Dedication. So he certainly consecrated Chanukah, understood the kind of miracle that it was. So there will be no, well, the final solution to the Jewish problem is there is no problem. The Lord will come back, the King of the Jews, establish his throne of David in Jerusalem, and the kingdom will start, and Israel will be the head of the nations as it belongs. And remember the gifts of funds. You know, I say this on each program because that's what really keeps us going. We're not running a store here. We have a national television program to pay for. And Sha'alu Shalom Yerushalayim. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem.